welcome everybody to what we have now dubbed the coast to coast version of Clever Conversation. I'm Mike Cavanaugh with Regiment. I'm down here at the tip of Miami Beach at the Hedge Fund Week conference, and I'm being joined today by John DeCarlo. John is an executive director with JP Morgan, and John is out in Los Angeles. John, in his executive directing, heads up the technology and disruptive commerce initiatives for JP Morgan Chase. John, welcome to Clever Conversations.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great to have you. Was looking forward to this all week to get a chance to chat with you and learn about your entrepreneurial journey within the ranks of JP Morgan, how you got to the executive director level, and learning, what you're looking at, and some segments of the market. So, why don't you give us that? How did you end up at the executive director level? Give us the Reader's Digest version of your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, no, perfect. Thank you. And for the group's benefits, I'm based in Los Angeles. As Mike said, part of our tech team and within our innovation economy group at JP Morgan, which we've been very actively growing out for a bit of time now. But yeah, as far as my journey, being in LA, I actually started more on the digital media side of things and was more content focused. But over time, and this is probably about 6 years ago or so, I started getting more interested in the actual platforms and infrastructure and how things are being delivered, how things are being monetized, which actually then gets into more at a granular level of how payments are actually happening and how that actually can affect user bases and grow revenue. So I really kind of shifted my focus more to the platform side. And then we were also building out our fintech and payments focus. And so that's really where I spend most of my time now.
That's great. Yeah, the media, I mean, that makes sense. You're in LA. You started in the media world, and then the shift to the platform. About when did that shift from media into like the payments platform fintech happen for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it happened kind of halfway through my time at JP Morgan, which was about 6 years ago or so. And I think we were spending more and more time on the video game side. And I think when you think about digital media, and again, as far as platforms and delivery, and then the payment side, there's a lot of really interesting things going on in the gaming space. And there has been for a while, as far as just digital in-game currencies, digital assets. And again, this all kind of, hit the mainstream maybe a couple years ago more, but that's been happening there. So I think that's always been of high interest to me. And then as well as on the music side too, when you start thinking about more independent artists and gig economy, which again dovetails into just high volume of payouts and how are we actually getting money, and how are we making sure that content owners or creators, and again, this is really beyond media, but how people are really getting their share and their royalty payments and all that, which I think actually gets really interesting as far as, again, kind of broader gig economy.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, you're like in one of the, if not the cradle of creative, energy and being in LA. So seeing all that stuff, and then I can see like how you get drawn into like, hey, we've got all this creative energy out here. You still have to get paid. You still have to have the functionality. So I can see how that lured you into the, to the dark side, so to speak, of payments, to actually build that platform. One question I get a lot from people in the fintech and the payments, like more in the startup space, or just emerging technology spaces. How does one work with JP Morgan? Like how would I engage if I'm a startup founder, if I've got a payments platform or a fintech company? Obviously JP Morgan is a very well-known name in the payment space. Maybe my startup isn't, but I think I have, a platform that I can, reach more people and would be able to reach more through JP Morgan, but don't know how to navigate. Like, how do you find technologies, great technologies. Like there's always that, you know, it's like a journey to find the right
Hmm.
person at an institution. Like maybe you could give us some
Yeah.
insight there. That would be an interesting thing to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and even I like that term a lot, the journey, and I might kind of use that as far as how we think about embedding and integrating payments into ultimately a software platform. And that's actually the term we use is your payments journey. And so maybe if you think about first, probably the main area in software, we spend a lot of time on it is vertical software. So again, you're picking an individual industry, and I mentioned some media sectors like that could be gaming, that could be other things, could be construction, prop tech, whole variety of things. But um, a vertical software, and you have some kind of more offering that's specific to that industry. Um, then early on, I think this is happening more and more earlier too. I think platforms are seeing the benefit of adding payments as an option. And when I say adding payments, um, uh, probably mostly what I mean more is for some of these platforms, if maybe your customers are SMBs, and they're saying, look, it'd be great if you could actually, process my credit card payments for me and just give me the payout. So, maybe I'm a smaller company or an independent, contractor, different things. So a lot of vertical software companies will say, okay, let me add on payments as an add-on to my offering. So this is very early in the journey, we'll say. And you can do that in a variety of ways, and you can do that in a very low touch way, and really more of even just a referral model of just, I'll say, hey, I could even just send this customer to a banking partner, almost like a customer acquisition funnel for a bank. Um, that can, along your payments journey, that can evolve into taking more and more ownership of those payments. And there's various reasons why you would want to do that. But I think the thing that we usually talk to talk to companies and founders about is, uh, one, if you're a vertical software company, you should be thinking about payments. Doesn't mean like that needs to be your core objective or you need to switch your model, but you should be at least thinking about that because it is a great way to, again, have an added on solution and additionally monetize. And then you can keep evolving along that journey and taking more ownership. And when I say ownership, you might say, oh, well, actually, maybe I want to build this out more myself. And maybe I want to do that because I want a more custom tailored offering. Maybe I want to do some more interesting things, maybe even on the pay outside. So again, we'll go back to maybe some kind of field services software platform, and you're working with independent contractors or SMBs, and they say, okay, well, why don't you software platform? It'd be great if you could collect those credit card payments for me. You have that money, maybe rather than just sending that to me, now can you actually run my payroll too? Can you actually run vendor spend for me? And so you actually see this start, and this is kind of a broader embedded banking conversation. You might have heard that term, embedded finance, embedded banking. But then you start seeing the software platform, acting more like a bank in a lot of ways and offering banking services. And so there's a whole journey along that. It can take a lot of different approaches, again, from kind of hands-on to very, custom made. And so maybe, Mike, I'll pause there. I think the next iteration of that is even just credit offerings too for the platforms as well.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I mean, start with the vertical focus. And then, like you said, I mean, JP Morgan's there basically say, hey, look, you're basically with our offering, our back end, you're the bank. Like the customer knows you. Um, I'm sure there's like some, agreement between the company that integrates, but you're basically allowing that customer with that vertical focus to leverage the trust it has with its um, client base to basically lend that trust on the banking side from JP Morgan to the vertical payments company. Well, now it would be a payments company. They might sell
Right.
mufflers to auto parts stores, but now they're a bank.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
really interesting.
and that's the interesting thing too, is that what we often find, again, maybe the company and the core offering is a more traditional software offering, but sometimes before they know it, in a sense, it's like, wow, you really are a payments company. And this is where I've been seeing more and more of a trend of, again, software traditionally more of a SaaS model, so a recurring model, whether that's monthly, annual contracts with their customers. But once you start getting into the payments realm, sometimes that shifts, and you might even actually start reducing the SaaS fee. You might even remove it potentially, but you might start to monetize more via the transactional payment side. Um, and so it's an interesting element, and I think it's probably especially interesting in the context when you start thinking about differences in valuation as well, and implications of moving away from a truly recurring source of revenue, which is generally SaaS, to more of a, we'll call it reoccurring, where again, you might not have contracts in place, but I think when you look at, and again, these are broad strokes, but when you look at payments companies, they can still have very high retention rates that are still very sticky, strong businesses. And so those are things you ultimately need to kind of, I guess, prove out as well. But there's definitely reasons as far as on the payment side where you might be able to monitor, like maybe your LTV for your customers actually might be bigger. And then again, kind of focusing on that retention, which again can still be very strong with a more of a transactional model.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. The holy grail in payments has always been the three words: cheaper, faster, more secure. How much do you pay attention to those three areas? Which one do you think has, the highest degree of your attention, or is it equal amongst those three?
Yeah, those are three key terms. Absolutely. And so I think they're all important. Absolutely. And I think if you um, the faster, maybe we'll just kind of tick through them. Like faster payments, there's a lot of talk more on like real-time payments. And again, we talked about gig economy, um, the speed that you're able to push out payments. So again, collection in and then speed to get it out to ultimately whoever's owed that money. Um, Especially for again, like SMBs, independent contractors, all that. There's a very real benefit to that speed element. And then definitely with peer-to-peer transactions and things like that. So the faster payments is absolutely where everything's headed. Um, I think what comes with that, maybe then we would pivot to one of the other terms you mentioned as far as security, and that's where KYC, know your customer, AML, so anti-money laundering. There needs to be robust practices in place because the faster money is moving, the more chance there is of fraud or bad actors. And so I think that's the other trend we're seeing as well, as far as just KYC as a service, companies getting really focused on that element because of that speed of money movement. Um, and then the cheaper part, cost always matters as well, for sure. And so that, I think that absolutely comes into play too. And I think some of these models, if you are monetizing on the payment side, a lot of them can operate on very thin margins because you may be taking a very small skim on top of, again, you as the software company are probably partnering with another fintech or bank, and so maybe you're making it just, again, like kind of a small margin on top of that. So the cost of it can kind of make or break a model sometimes. So I think all three of those are definitely integral to the conversation.
Yeah. And being, at JP Morgan, it's how much of your job is, being a bank versus being a technology company. It almost seems like the relevance of the technology and being able to identify new technologies, whether you create them or acquire them or help co-develop them. Like maybe you can give us some insight into, are you a bank or are you a technology firm, or where do those two meet at such a
Mhm.
large institution?
Yep. Yeah, and everything I'm mentioning here, this is more just kind of from my perspective. So I'll just speak more broadly to it. But
Got
um,
it.
I think uh, there's definitely a lot of overlap when you think about just financial services traditionally and technology. And I think the tech side of it is playing just more and more of a key role generally. And I know Mike, before this, we were talking a little about like why now and like why a lot of this stuff is happening more. And I do think that element of that the tech is now there, and it's broad enough too, where if you're a platform, there's a lot of banking as a service type offerings, a lot of whole whole service offerings that you can kind of get up and running with a lot of these services we've been talking about here on the payment side, embedded banking. You can kind of get those set up relatively quickly now. Like those offerings are there. Now, there's obviously a cost associated with that if you're going to somewhat outsource that to others. And again, that's something that along your journey that you probably continue to weigh, as far as where you are as a company, as far as where you want to put capital and resources to play. But I think those offerings are there. I think there's still a lot of opportunity to make those better though as well. Like as far as efficiencies, I think there's um, some really interesting things still going on, from like a blockchain perspective too, as far as like the future of just money movement and transactions. Obviously, there's I'm talking more separate from crypto, but more just like the technology behind blockchain, as far as just transparency of transactions, reconciliation, cross-border money movement. Like, there's some pretty interesting things that I think are still to come. And again, these are all tech-driven in a kind of broader traditional financial service sector.
Yeah. My question was actually, for the sake of the recording, how are these firms and the new companies dealing with micro or small payments and the cost of them for the merchants?
Yeah, yeah, and I think uh, it's a good point. And to be totally honest, that one area like is probably um, not an area. I don't know if I can expand on it too much as far as the microtransactions. I mean, I definitely see that a lot on the gaming side. And as you know, as far as on from like a credit card payment perspective, when you start talking about like kind of per transaction fees, it gets challenging when you're buying something that's rather cheap. And so I think, but that area I'm not as close to, so I don't know if I can best answer that. But
Fair enough. So my question was more related to, every time somebody brings up the word blockchain, it goes straight into the crypto rabbit hole. Let's leave crypto out of it and just talk to, you know, how you, John, see blockchain integrating that cheaper, faster, more secure, or does it does blockchain have a bigger effect on any one of those three areas or equal on all three?
yeah, so I think probably when I think about it, I definitely think about the faster, secure side. I think the cheaper, when you start getting into, there's kind of like a whole rabbit hole we could get down as far as like costs associated with on the blockchain side. But I do think as far as faster, more secure, and so I think when you kind of come back again, like we were just getting into as far as transparency of transactions, which I think, when you start getting into ledgering and the reconciliation side, and then faster money movement, probably especially across borders, and even not across borders, when you think about some of the time it takes to move money through, even some, I'll say, some more like local rails here as well. Um, so I think that element, as far as the speed and security, is a big thing that the blockchain solves for. And then I think just kind of the broader, as far as just decentralization of a platform, I think is kind of an interesting case as well, and it starts getting into more just consumer behavior and comfort, and around who's controlling a lot of this money movement and like who it's flowing through, and if a certain governing body or a certain company or people, whatever, are kind of in control of that versus not. And I think that's another whole area you could get into, as far as you can start getting to like human psychology and preferences of, again, kind of a certain group versus actually like a tech platform. And I think there's probably areas of both of that people have more or less comfort with. But on kind of the tech side of it, and really more of like an automated smart contract based contract system. And again, going back to even on the digital media side with like, say, a royalties, like X happened and therefore this person is going to get paid Y, and it's all just more automated. And then again, transparent as well via ledger too, so I think there's a lot of benefits from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably spend a couple hours just talking about each one of those. Regulatory,
Yeah,
interborder payments, like with the regulatory aspect of those, is probably we could write a PhD dissertation on that and take months of the explanations behind all of it. So, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, and even on that, because and then what, from like when you mentioned the regulatory side, and when you start getting into the AI conversation too around payments, there's just challenges, right? Whenever, and again, this is where we're starting to just see more of like the tech is kind of there or getting there, that things can be, again, automated and essentially run by a platform. And yes, payments are happening via a platform, but actually like, somewhat decisions, or at least more basic decisions, around who's getting paid and what. And that's when you start getting into this world of, okay, well, who's responsible if something goes awry? Or going back to our comment earlier about faster payments and security, and ultimately, again, the conversation around fraud, and AML protections, like who's safeguarding all this and who's watching over all this. And I think those are just some of the broader challenges, probably with both blockchain and the AI side of things. But those are, I mean, that's fine. I mean, these are challenges, but there's so much opportunity with that to, again, kind of grow this whole sector from where it is today.
Yeah. I'm going to give the people listening in time to type in some questions in the chat. For the benefit of everybody on, you mentioned opportunities, looking forward into this year, the next half a decade. What should we be keeping our ears open for you? What should we be looking out for? What can we send your way? What's helpful? How do we support you, and what you're doing at JP?
Yeah. I'm really here to try to help founders and companies scale. And we mentioned that payments journey of like how to think about that payments journey. And when you're hitting certain milestones in that, where it's like, okay, and to me, again, at a very high level, one of the big ones is when, and again, I focus on payments, but when does payments become strategic for your company? And again, that could be a variety of reasons, but maybe again, your customers need to get paid out quicker or whatever it is. But when does that actually become a strategic initiative for you, that you say, okay, well, I actually want to build something out, and this is actually like a key piece of my offering, as opposed to maybe it's an add-on solution, but like this is really what I do, something else. And so that's really like that major milestone in the journey of having to shift gears, and actually probably it's like, okay, now it's at the top of our priority list and let's figure out how to build something. That's usually kind of the conversations we're having.
Got it. Super helpful. We'll definitely keep our ears open. We come across portfolio companies, startups all the time where The payments journey is definitely on the roadmap. So we will definitely keep our ears open. Um, I don't see any questions in the chat. Does anybody have any questions? Want to go on camera, chime in? Feel free to do so now. And if we don't have any, John, can you just maybe drop your email address in the chat, or like your Twitter handle, or how we can get in touch with you if we do find a portfolio company with anybody on the call here?
Yeah, I do have a question about smart contracts, if I could, John.
Oh, there we go.
Working with some of the lawyers that we work with, it calls into question the enforceability of smart contracts from a legal perspective. I assume we don't have all of that solved now, but it looks like we are going that way to where at least payments can be set up in an automated way and not so much an actual legal contract, just an addendum to the automated payments. Can you shine a little bit of light on that?
Yeah, well, I think, yes, I hear you on that point, and I think that is where there's probably, seeing some progress there. And I think, again, probably people just better understanding what they are. To me, a lot of this is also like, Mike, I think at the beginning you were mentioning like crypto often gets lumped in with blockchain, again, for obvious reasons, but separating things out as far as how some of this technology is working and what the function is. And ultimately, Brent, probably to your point, ultimately figuring out like where is their risk, and again, risk from especially from like a fraud AML perspective for regulators. It's like, where is their risk, and maybe where is there not that much risk. And so I think as everyone starts to just get a better grasp around it, and you just get a little more comfort around it, and then you can actually start put in place rules and laws to control that in a way that hopefully doesn't deter what the technology is trying to do for the good. But yeah, I think that's kind of where it's all growing to, as people kind of have a better feel for it.
Awesome.
Thanks for that question. Yep. Thanks, Brent. Any other questions?
John, if you don't mind, Mike, let me ask a real general one to keep that way, because I've got a bunch of specific ones I could ask you later on. Where do you see venture capital / private equity / growth capital focusing in the area right now? Because it's such a broad area.
Yeah. So I think probably what we see a lot, I kind of talked about vertical software, but so basically generally the verticalization of software. So I think that's a big one. There's some more horizontal plays as well, but you probably see that more at like a little more of a scaled level where you're covering, really you're more maybe just like a large bill pay provider for a lot of different industries. But as far as on the earlier stage side, I think we see a lot focused on industry verticals. And then I think the other element too that's kind of come back, so I'll call it consumer fintech, I think had a big push for a while, and then there was kind of this pullback. And then right now I think there's a refocus on certain areas as far as services for consumers. And so I think that's around whether that's kind of less so like maybe like a whole new, kind of consumer bank, but more like budgeting, cost savings, like how can maybe yield optimization on like your balances in your account, how to automate that more in a way for consumers to basically save money or earn more. So I think there's becoming more of a push and focus there as well, that we're kind of seeing like kind of a refocus on like direct consumer offerings.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Great question, Larry. Thank you. All right, John, thank you for being generous with your time. We went over a little bit here. It was great to have you on and get some insights, and look forward to staying in touch. And, hopefully we come across some better, cheaper, faster, more secure solutions that we can throw over to you and help on that journey with these startups.
Sounds great. Well, thanks again, Mike. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you, John. Have a great day.
All right. You too.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.